my camera on.
All right. Yes, Oscar. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so in terms of, yes, everything looks good, right? There's no changes over here. Okay, yeah, it looks good. We are live as well.
yeah.
Okay.
So, beginning with
Uh,
the topic, we are going to be talking about discoveries related to Ramayana and whether it really happened or not. So, we're going to be diving deep into that topic. As we know, Ramayana is one of the oldest books and written by Valmiki, and it has been considered a historical text by many scholars.
all right. Okay. So, okay, let's discuss more on that particular topic, right? So, we have this idea where we say that Ramayana is a history. According to Indian mythology, Hindu religion, it's itihasa, which means it's history, not a myth or a story. However, the
Hmm.
popular Western belief is that it's probably just stories which were, added on later part of the uh, years post second or third century. What
Yeah.
is your take on that?
I believe that the Ramayana is an actual happening in history, and as we see that there are many versions of Ramayana across Asia, from South to Southern Asia, it has a widespread influence. I don't think that a fictional story could have such a widespread influence.
All right, fair enough. So currently, I think Ramayana is almost followed in almost all South Asian countries, more or less, right? There's some the trace of
Yeah,
Ramayana, the same way. Could be variations, but the essence of it remains the same. And as you mentioned, there are several versions of Ramayana as well, and end of it, the core values or the core story remains the same. There is no alterations there, and it the argument is that if it's not true, if it's a regional story, then it has to be change over time. As it reaches a different place, it has to change over time, unless and until it's a fact which cannot be altered, which means that fact
mm,
remains the same even if it goes to different regions. That remains the same. But if you're
yes.
looking at the argument from the Western side, they look at more archaeological or some kind of contemporary evidence. How would one, face or challenge those belief systems? Like, what evidence can we provide?
I mean, there are a lot of markings in the text about the planetary alignments and astrological proofs. So that's one of the ways. And there are also many accounts in Chinese and Japanese texts about a prince named Ram entering their place. So it kind of proves the point that Ramayana did really happen and not that it was just a myth and a story, because having the same evidence in other countries in some different forms literally proves that the person actually existed and fought the war, because in a text in China it was mentioned that Rama in the prince came to offer the like alliance with them, so that is kind of a proof.
Sorry, which region was this?
I don't know specifically, but China did have the, like in the Koichi Sasaki version.
Okay,
Like, hmm.
got it.
What are your takes on the topic?
I'm a Hindu. I'm a following Hindu. I believe you are as well. And my understanding is that it did happen again. To me, it's more of the way stories are told. So we have a different way of putting history together. We don't have an obligation that it has to be written down. As in, the Indian civilization never really had this concept of written down stories or written down history. We had the oral tradition, which most religion or most regions had it as well, right? Most of them had oral tradition. Some point they moved on to written traditions. But we have a different. Sorry, looks like there's. Do you have a YouTube channel open as well along with this?
No.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so we have this tradition where we go by stories. The important stories are, whatever events happen that have moved into a story and that's been said, or there's been cascaded from fathers to sons or grandfathers to grandkids. That's the way that's the way it kept on, and those stories lasted no matter which region you move to or which location you are from. The stories, again, this become like a part of your family tradition kind of thing. You just keep moving, keep sharing this event, and they remain the same. That's the way history was shared in India for a very long time, right? And keeping that in mind, I would say oral traditions and also the way history was told in stories. I was watching this video of I think it's Dr. Raj Vedam, and where he talks about how the Ashwini Kumara's the event of Ashwini Kumara's birth was actually a real event which was told in a way how the sun disappeared from one region to and the summer was extreme in another region, but it came into a different way of storytelling. So based on that, as you also mentioned, the planetary alignments and stuff, the stories are told told in a different way, and since they're told in a different way, that has been recorded in traditions, histories, and culture. And we have that culture which hasn't been changed. For thousands of years, the story of Ramayana has not been corrupted within India, outside India too. So that for me is solid enough.
Yeah, oral traditions surely play a huge role in the passage of Ramayana and other accounts, because through oral traditions we could often come across folklores in the tribal communities of India's, where they have a very similar account corresponding to the Ramayana, such as Bhils and Gons. So that kind of proves that it is a historical basis, and cultural practices also like kind of associated with it, like Diwali and Dashera, they have been passed on for years. So I do believe that that's how Indians have continued to pass on the knowledge and the historical evidences.
Agreed. So from someone who was born in India, someone who's understood the Indian religion or Indian culture, so there is no doubt about it. Anyone who is born into a Hindu family or understands the concept of how the religion works wouldn't have a confusion about if it was actual event or if it's a story, because we have the fundamentals, which is this is how a story is told, right? We understand that. But the
Hmm.
challenge comes in when people who are not from India look into it and they see more of a mythology. For example, most religions or most famous religions are monotheistic, and they have the understanding that Hinduism is a polytheistic religion, which it is not. In the essence, it is still
Yes.
monotheistic as well. And when they look at it, they compare it with Greek or Norse mythology, and since those are pretty much dead religions, the understanding is that this is also something which was made up by men at some point, where they started making up these stories. There is no relevance to it whatsoever. Like,
Yes.
if you have to convince someone from the West, where you have to explain that Ramayana did happen with their way of looking into proof, like some kind of archaeological evidence or some kind of manuscript or text or some artifact, how would you approach it?
I mean, it is pretty obvious that for archaeological evidence, we can go for Ram Setus, which is also known as Adam's Bridge, and geological studies suggest a chain of limestone between India and Sri Lanka, which could be man-made, correlating with the bridge built in Rama's epic. And Ayodhya excavations, as we had earlier in this century, that showed archaeological findings in Ayodhya, have revealed ancient structures which do correspond with the text. So that could be a very solid proof for foreigners who haven't been born into this region in their ways, that archaeologically it coincides with the events mentioned in the epic. And some places mentioned in the Ramayana could also be a point, like Kishkinda and Lanka, which have been identified with real world sites, and it gives a little bit of credibility to the epic.
Interesting. So I'm from Karnataka. Kishkinda is now modern day Hampi. So the entire Vanara army and the region of Kishkinda happens to be
Yes,
from the state where
exactly.
I come from. So I have no convincing or no need for any convincing that if I need to believe it, I'm already sold in this idea, right? And I'm also a Hanuman devotee as well, so that's another addition. If you compare to north and south, this is one thing which you can draw parallel. The belief of Lord Rama in south is not as prevalent as it is in the north, right?
Hmm.
So even within the country, there is a small division where the acceptance rate is somewhat less.
I do not believe that's the case because even though most of the events that happened in the Ramayana were a bit more focused on the south side, but there are places in the
Mhm.
north where the historical accords exist too, because in Buddhist and Jain text, which originated from the northern region, also mention the story of Ramayana, and foreign accounts from Chinese travelers also mention a prince named Ram on his journey. So that gives a bit of belief in the northern area as well. We know that Diwali is celebrated across the country. So it suggests that most of the people in India do believe in the tradition, and the acceptance rate may be a bit low because there are literary contributions in the southern areas like the Kamba Rayanam library and the,
Balapanam, yeah.
yeah, those are pretty much literary contributions made towards the southern side, which may affect the acceptance percentage. So I don't believe that there is a difference, that big of a difference in the belief between north and south. There might be a bit other factors that could have led to this.
Possible because most South Indians tend to lean towards Shaivism, and that could affect as well. Because I've noticed South has a lot of Shiva worshippers, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
maybe that also plays a role. But yeah, that's interesting because yeah, it talks about South a lot. There was this video of Sadhguru as watching it, and he actually makes this claim. Uh, that is, he had a South Indian army to which he took to Lanka to fight. So this army itself was South Indian, is what he claims, right? And like I said, I come from Karnataka, so Hampi is in Karnataka, right? And
yeah,
all the evidence which was meant, all these locations mentioned in Ramayana is found in Hampi, so it's verified and validated as well. So there
yes,
is no doubt it's not it did not happen in South. It did take a major role in South as well, though.
yes,
Going
yes.
to
That,
Adam's Bridge. Sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 no. And you continue.
Yes, sir. So Adam's Bridge is another interesting thing. So what we call it as Ram Setu, right? And what Westerners call
Yeah,
it Adam's Bridge. Apparently, the name itself is in question at this point. Though there's two people claiming
yeah,
what the name is going to be. I'll continue to call it as Ram Setu. I don't want to address it as Adam's Bridge. Uh, for this particular topic, it makes more sense that way, right? I was doing some research back in time. So I was part of this UK based debate channel, right? And the similar discussion happened, and I provided this proof where the ASI and there's another team called the Science Channel where they had some discussions, like you mentioned about the structure. According to Ramayana, Valmiki's Ramayana, the bridge was built with rocks, stones, rocks, as well as woods and branches and all those things. They talk about several things used over there, but primarily it consists of rocks, right? And floating rocks, specifically rock was floating rocks. And in Hampi, they do have these floating rocks available in temples, as in that limestone formation which we're talking about. That particular is a 25 kg rock, and they have it in what do you call that? In like glass containers with water in it, and those rocks float. Have you seen
hmm.
those videos by any chance?
Yeah. I have seen the videos, and it is pretty fascinating because limestone couldn't have like naturally originated in that region, and it must have been bought by somebody else to over there, which kind of makes it man-made. And the monkey army, which was supposedly the constructor of the bridge, was kind of like it was built with coral reefs and sandbanks, which are claimed to be archaeologically around 7,000 to 18,000 years old, which matches with the time evidences in the Ramayana. So that is an archaeological proof that we're talking about. And the claim made by the Adams Bridge, which is kind of controversial because two people are claiming over the same bridge,
Hmm.
which kind of coincides with the events because Adam wasn't really even around at that time.
Yeah, according to Christian mythology, as Christian theology, he comes around 6,000 years. That's when the Earth was created, right? So if this is 7,000 years, he's 1,000 years late. So that argument falls apart right there, right?
Yes.
And yeah, so yeah, definitely it's just no credit given to Adam there, but we have to give credit to Ram and Lord Rama and his team of Vanaras. So yeah, these stones do exist, and those stones do float. So which the story says that they use stones, and the stones floated on the water, right? Now, this could be a mythological thing. People like this is just a fairy tale. How can stones float? Right? It makes no sense. They never use the term limestones precisely in Ramayana, but the stones they mention about stones, and those stones do exist, and those stones do float, right? And based on how they've advised, whatever's mentioned in Ramayana happens to be the same. There are floating stones, and that formed a bridge
Hmm.
which the Vanara army crossed from one region to another region, right? And
Yeah.
there is a more actually there are more informations in terms of this, but I wanted to play a video. Then I want to go back to two articles which we could discuss. Though, let me just quickly play this video and you know show you this particular info though first.
Yeah.
All right, let me just play this
Such
video.
a long bridge would have been a superhuman achievement.
Right, so that video was interesting because it covered few things. Hold on one second. Sorry, yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So this is interesting because that video talks about few things, which uh, it specifically addresses the year, which is a stone, the how long the stone has been on top of it, which is 7,000 years, which is what modern beliefs are, how old Ramayana is, 7,000 years, right? And it talks about how how, as you mentioned, the stones can never be from that location. It has to be moved in from some a different place, which is also validated by them. These are actual geologists, as mentioned over there. And I'll give you more info on that particular channel specifically. Why? Because the question might arise: how can a YouTube channel validate what happens here, right? So they are validated because ASI, the Archaeological Survey of India, they acknowledge them. Which is, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me, right? So they talk about these things, and all that information mentioned over there, and they all align accordingly, just the way we've discussed so far. Now coming to this particular channel, right? So what is this channel all about? It's called the Science Channel, right? And
Hmm.
they are a US based channel which does all the researches in terms of archaeology and other things, right? But before we go there, I want to show you another article so that I can tie them up together and make more sense of it, right? So there was a discussion. I think Times of India published an article in 2021, Jan 14th. Let me bring up that article as well on the screen. One second. Right. So this is the article Times of India brought. So published, sorry, on the 21st of Jan 14th. Right. So Jan 14th of Jan 2021 is when they published this article. And based on this article, if you notice, the question is was this a natural formation or not? And this goes on saying that ASI, which is the Archaeological Survey of India, they did not think it's a natural formation, and that's exactly what they have mentioned as well. If we go down further, you could see that. Hold on, where is that first one? Yeah, yeah. So they initially did not believe this is a man-made structure. This is a natural formation, and it cannot be man-made, is what they claimed, and they had this affidavit put up in the Supreme Court as well. and this goes somewhere over, yeah, over here. Sorry, this paragraph, right? So, based on the claim, they say the project holds religious and political significance, which we all understand, and they talk about how this particular structure cannot be man-made, and how the structure is in natural formation. And this is something they submitted. It's a human-made. It's, that it is a human-made, right? And this particular claim was made in 2007, right? And they said there's no evidence that it's human made, so it cannot be right what is mentioned in the Ramayana, in Ramayana. But later they withdrew this affidavit from the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I
Now
do
it does not,
remember this time.
yeah, it does not give you more details in terms of why, what happened, all those things. It The article goes on talking about the validity of the bridge and the historicity of the same thing, though. But it does not say exactly why it went and did what it did. So I had to do some investigation, like why did ASI, which is a reputed institution, would withdraw something as such. So when I was doing that, I came across another article, and this article was the one that helped me understand better, which is from another website called P India. So they talk about similar interest as well about the Ramayana and what ASI did to approve the research program. So it seems like ASI, when they provided that information, they approved a research program to find out the validity, but it was Indians and other political party who did not want it to happen because they feared that it might affect the structure, or it might affect their faith and belief system. So they didn't approve this. So that's when they left that idea out, and they moved on with their statement, which is the Supreme Court. They mentioned that this in 2007, as you can see, and it said it's not a man-made; it's an artificial structure. And this article goes on saying the missing link, which we had in the previous article, the affidavit incidentally came close to heel of a research-based program in the US-based Discovery Science Channel, which showed the Setu was man-made and not natural. Moreover, studies of oceanology has also suggested that the bridge is 7,000 years old, and carbon dating the beaches near the Nishkodi and Manar Islands roughly matches the dates of Ramayana. So once a
Yeah,
Western institute did this research and they have provided sufficient proof, a reputed institution like ASI withdrew their affidavit in the Supreme Court because of this finding. And now
yeah,
this validates that team, because Archaeological Survey of India is a reputed institution. If they find the credibilities and credentials of that team as superior, which is the reason they had let go of that argument, which means that's a good enough information for me to, I can refer to that YouTube video as well, because that's a reputed institution recognized by the ASI.
yeah. That should be a very reputable and trustable information, because NASA has also proved it, while US-based Discovery Channel. Lots of proofs have come from all across the world, which has to like counteract the politically reasons, because there might be people who are actually scared of the bridge being declared religional because of archaeological and the entrepreneurial benefits.
Hmm.
So, building a better idea for the cultural and religious significance of the bridge might also help about this. And talking about Rama Setu, there are also another Setu mentioned in the books, which is the Nala Setu, and
Not a state.
that, yeah, that also coincides with the evidences. So that might be a good thing that they could look into. By the carbon dating and everything, they could actually prove that it was built in the 7,000s and not just naturally formed, because we have enough proof that the Ram Setu was built at 7,000. But to prove that the Ramayana did happen at that time, we could cross check the two bridges, and if they are at the same time, which could not be that big of a coincidence, then we could maybe do a bit of a proof that the Ramayana did happen.
I agree. So remember we had a discussion where South sometimes doesn't recognize the Ramayana as much as the North does. So I was under the website. I was on the website of Tamil Nadu tourism website, and apparently they also address it as Adams Bridge. which is kind of funny though. Like, I don't know why Indian website would call it Adams Bridge. And they also say that let me just pull up this article that makes more sense. One second. Yeah, this is the tourism website. So it starts with Ram Setu, and it says Rameshwaram has a vast number of pilgrims visiting, and this is only for this particular bridge. And again, this is a government website, just so you know. It's a government website, and this website talks about details. It has its information what this is all about. As it goes on, says about the historical evidence from Ramayana and the Vanara army which built the bridge. And coming to this particular portion of what the art the website says is that the GSI, again the Geological Survey of India, under Project Rameshwaram, they have done their research and they have addressed that this particular regions were exposed around 7,000 to 18,000 years ago. So this makes sense in terms of region, but they go on saying the corals the survey indicates Adams Bridge were formed around again 5,500 to 600 years ago only. So this is another thing which I want to talk about. So when they're doing the carbon dating, each one is claiming different information. For example, the previous video we saw where they took the rocks as well as the sandbars into consideration. But if you look at the ASI as well as the GSI survey, they took only the coral reefs as part of their investigation. They didn't consider the rocks or the sandbars. And going by the Science Channel, even if it's as late as the sandbar, which they say it's a natural accumulation of sand, which is around 4,000 years, the rocks themselves were placed around 7,000 years. That validates the argument. And even if we go by the government website over here, they do talk about this entire region, which is around 7,000 to 18,000 years ago. Their only argument is that bridge, which may not be 7,000 years ago, but they do agree that that entire region is around 7,000 to 18,000 years ago based on their research. Again, this is on a government website based on
Hmm.
the GSI
Oh,
survey.
okay. So
So we have a
the
little bit of yes, sir. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, so the historical context could maybe suggest that the ancient sea level might have been varying, and that they only check the coral reefs, which is kind of a understatement, because checking coral reefs is a not a really precise method, because coral growth could also be found which are 500 to 600 old, and warm waters which have, like, during the ice age there was no, that at the point of the Ramayana there was also the ice age, which could might have like drawn significant climatic shifts, including the rising of sea levels after the period, which could expose less of the land bridge and submerge other parts of the bridge and influence the coral growth after the bridge had formed. So it may be that the corals are 500 to 600 years old, but the bridge in itself should not be should be 7,000 to 18,000 year old, because after the ice age the sea levels have risen, as I said, and the
Mhm.
carbon dating done on the wrong sample might be the reason why the reports are crossing clashing.
Exactly. And even if we go by these GSI and ASI surveys, uh, to me, if ASI has an affidavit in the Supreme Court, if they withdrew based on another team's research and they consider that to be a valid research, because they would not take, because their reputation is also at stake here, they would not take back their uh, research if it's not validated completely. And that strongly affirms that this is 7,000 years old, which is again the common understanding. People say that Ramayana is around 7,000 years old, and it falls on that period precisely. Right? We have an archaeological proof, we have a geographical proof, we have stories that are not similar but exactly the same throughout all regions, right? And all of these things prove towards Ramayan's existence. But in terms of manuscript is where we have a problem, because we don't have the manuscripts at that old. I think the earliest one is around the third century or fourth century. How
Hmm.
important are manuscripts?
The manuscripts might not suggest the true literature, because as we talked about earlier, the the history and the culture in India is to pass on material by oral methods, which could lead to a bit loss of knowledge and a bit not a really text based way of passing down the information, because as Shakespeare also said that if things are passed on orally they might be remembered, but monuments and texts might not be remembered. But yeah, there are a few manuscripts which could also be brought into the play by the Ramayana, which was, I think, in the
Hmm.
12th century, described the work of the construction of the bridge. And the Valmiki Ramayana is the biggest manuscript you can find relating to this topic, because it was a very detailed account for the engineering feats, materials used, and strategic importance of the bridge to rescue Sita from Lanka. So yeah, I think manuscripts don't play that huge of a role in the building of Ram Setu, because at the end of the day, nobody really followed manuscripts and texts at that time in India.
Hmm. Okay. So manuscripts don't really have a major impact. So I think manuscript, when we're looking at the impact, it's only to convince the Western audience or the Western civilization that this is important, because they base their claims on their manuscripts, right? So due to which is where we are under the, not the obligation, but again the assumption that we have to have a manuscript. But to us, as in from Indians perspective, or the way Hinduism works, is that we are not obligated to prove the existence, only because it's a belief system and it's passed on from traditions to traditions. So similar framework which is used to validate one religion to another religion is not true or not right way of going about, because the time frames are different, the rules which are used for that particular framework are different, and the regions are different. The same cannot be applied to validate Ramayana or Mahabharata, for example.
Yeah,
So we'll have
but
to take a different route.
hmm. But even if we go through the Western method of like going through the manuscripts and everything, we could also take into accounts of Fahian and what was that guy's name? There was Fahian and Huin Sang. Those are Chinese travelers, and these
Hmm.
historians mention a bridge connecting India and Sri Lanka, which was indeed man-made in their texts, could also suggest the action that it is a manuscript that aligns with the context of the Ramayana, which was constructed in our century. So the historical amount accounts could also contribute to the existence and structural significance of the Rama Setu, while there are Greek and Roman accounts by classic historians who are traveling from Greece that have also made indirect references to the bridge. I won't go too deep on the article point, but they are indicating that its recognition is in ancient global geography. So, according to the records of Chinese, Greek, and Roman people, that could bring into account that that bridge indeed was built, and manuscripts are also supporting that fact. And meanwhile, we work on the Ramayana and the proof of the entire book and the everything. We could maybe say that the proofs are enough in the manuscripts to show that these are real evidences.
Correct. In other words, we are not, we don't have to follow the same framework which they use because it suits their narrative. But for us, it's different. So the same framework might not work. We have other ways of proving it, and that's good enough. For example, uh, there is this method, or not method, a tradition which is followed in Hinduism, where when you go to a temple, right, when you start worshiping, you provide your, you provide your parents' name, or when when they do this final rituals, they talk about, whose son you are, whose grandson you are, or when you're getting married or something of that sort, they talk about whose son and whose daughter these people are, right? The
Hmm.
names would be continued as I mentioned as well. And this is something which is done in modern day as well, right? Even if at all there is an engagement or a wedding, they talk about, before introducing the bride and the groom, they always bring up the ancestral line, like this person, she's a daughter of this person, who is son of this person, who is a granddaughter of this person, and it goes on and on until they stop where they couldn't find their ancestors. Until then, it goes on, right? It's a common tradition followed all over India, especially in South. I know it's very prevalent. I'm assuming it's throughout India, because the same thing is mentioned in Ramayana as well, which is the Vamshavali. And this goes to, let me pull up my Ramayana book if you don't mind. So in the Valmiki Ramayana, before Lord Rama and uh, goddess Sita were married, there is a ceremony again, just like how modern day weddings happen. The culture doesn't change from then to now; it still remains the same, right? There is a ceremony, and during the ceremony, they do talk about who these people are and their stories as well, like who are their ancestors and everything. And they do talk about their ancestors and give you a complete breakdown of the first person, as in the Vamshavali where it starts, as well as the entire family background. So it cannot be a story. It cannot be a made up story if you have to give an entire lineage to justify it from the beginning,
Mm,
right?
that kind of suggests that, and that too that there are many versions of the Ramayana suggesting the same thing. Like you could go for the Indonesian version, which was the Kakavin Ramayana, if I'm not wrong. But yeah,
Hmm.
there are a lot of articles suggesting this as well, because the myth of Ramasetu and the truth of this canal could also prove that, because in the evidences and like the current research that is going on right now, that could bring into proof that this did happen. And the Valmiki Ramayana, as you said, suggests the same thing.
Yes, sir. So in the Valmiki Ramayana, I think it's Balakanda, and where you have Sarga
Yeah.
69, and I think it starts from uh, verse 10 to 15. That's where it starts, 10 and 15, where Vashishta is the one who talks about the wedding, and he starts how the Ishkavu dynasty started, and all the people who are part of that religion, right? Part of that family. He mentioned every single person by name to describe where Lord Rama's ancestors come from. Every single person without skipping anyone. So it talks about who's the son of whom and what were they famous for and who's son of whom until it comes to Lord Rama. They talk about every single one of them. And they don't stop with just Lord Rama. The same thing happens with Goddess Sita's lineage as well, right? And we have she comes from the Luna dynasty, where Lord Rama comes from the Solar dynasty. So her dynasty is also clearly listed and talks about the hierarchy, not the hierarchy, so the ancestral line from like who comes from whom. And it cannot be a made up story if they have to give you an entire family tree, because family trees, again, you can come up to a certain time. You cannot go up to 40 different generations to bring up these numbers. Minimum 40 is what's mentioned over there, and this is 7,000 years ago, and they have 40 different generations mentioned, right? That's, again, that tradition is still followed. I would have not agreed if the tradition was not followed, because that tradition is still followed. Because when I got married, the same thing was done as well during my wedding. The same traditions took place. So it's a tradition which has been followed from then until now, and it will continue to be the same as well until people stop following these traditions. This also justifies the culture which we had back in time, the culture which still exists. There is no major change in the culture
Hmm.
because it has been followed from father to son or mother to daughter. It's an ongoing thing.
Hmm. Like as you said, the genealogical detail given in the ancestry book, like the sage Vasishta and King Ikshvaku, and many others. Like there's such a precise record of the characteristics of the historical and rather than fictional accounts. Because if they were fictional, they couldn't have given such a detailed and such a inspiring account, spreading the admiration of Rama and Sita, because not only they mentioned the historical records, as well as they mentioned the entire bloodline, which could also be connected to other forms of other versions of the Ramayana, and the mention
Hmm.
of the Saptarishi in the Hindu mythology could also cross account to other manuscripts as well, because not only the Valmiki's Ramayana suggests that the Ramayana happened, but also books that have dated earlier have also, no, not like earlier, after the event have also like given the proof that this actually happened, because the Ikshvaku dynasty that descended from Manu could also be progenerator in mankind, because he was renowned for his virtuous rulers and adherence to dharma. But leaving that aside, the historical account and the genealogical account that was given in the book, and that Ramayana was indeed not fake. It gives a very detailed account, which is not easy to fake. And even if it was faked, there are a lot of other evidences that suggest the opposite. So the genealogical records are surely and on place. And meanwhile, going for the divine interventions and blessings that were given in the way, which also give as a physical structures that were built on the way, like in the Ayodhya and the Vishnu Puran, there is also proof.
Understood. Yeah, I have the same idea as well. That there isn't. That I have no intention of thinking that this could not be real, because everything which I have heard, everything which I have seen, proves it to be a real account rather than a story. And we also have, even if it's a story, even if it had to be a story, assuming that this is what it is, it wouldn't have been classified under itihasa if it was, because itihasa, as it means, as this happened, right? Anything which is a story, it could even go under the Puranas sometimes have certain things which may not be fully, again, depending on who you talk to. Some people may believe in Puranas, some people may not believe in Puranas. I take it with a little bit of extra cautiousness. The reason, because some of the stories I might not agree with as well, right? But if Ramayana was one of those stories, as people would claim, then it would be part of the Puranas and not Itihasas. The only two Itihasas which have been recorded as histories, which is Ramayana and Mahabharata, right? No other stories come to no other incidents or stories will have been recorded as Itihasas, because the tagline of the specific categorization that the history or tradition our ancestors put them were in Itihasas, which is history and not mythology or stories. So that is solid enough for me to begin
Hmm.
with.
Like, as we both go for a straightforward and a supportive view towards the existence of the Ramayana and if it really happened, we could also
Mhm.
argue on the fact that it does describe vast landscapes, mythical cities, and other supernatural occurrences which do not align with the geographical and the scientific perspectives. As I'm considering this from a from the point of someone who does not believe that the Ramayana did happen, what points they could give.
Mhm.
Like, for example, we could go for the Vimans and celestial cities that were mentioned in the Ramayana, and that people possessing mystical powers and everything. So, which could be some kind of interpretation that Ramayana was a story instead of history, because this is what people usually argue about, and that there's a lack of archaeological evidence and chronological and historical content, literally, and mythological interpretations. Those are a few points that the people who do not agree that the Ramayana did happen could argue on. But as I say, that there is more evidence for the existence of Ramayana rather than the disproving that the Ramayana did not happen. So, taking that into account, we could think that through critical historical analysis and something like authorship, political agendas, religious influence, and literary genres, the Ramayana is unlike other ancient epics, because it does align with whether you say the astrological evidences mentioned in the book, and that there's a lot of evidences for the occurrence of the Ramayana. And through historical
Mhm.
analysis, we could say that there might be a few factors that hold against the Ramayana, but it is quite challenging to prove that the Ramayana did not actually happen, because in the end, the consistency of the descriptions adds weight to the argument that Ramasetu is no more than the mythological construct, which could also prove that the Ramayana is more than a mythological thing. And going into that account, we could say that these accounts have been preserved for a long time, and it has an integral role in shaping the cultural identity of India. But it is providing a robust evidence of historical authenticity. So that breaks down all of the arguments given by people who do not believe that the Ramayana happened. What are your thoughts upon that?
I like that argument where people say that Vimanas, okay, that's just fairy tale. Okay, let me just, I like to, discuss that specific one. So, what are Vimanas essentially describing? It's a means of transportation which is used in the Ramayana, where which is again an aerial means of transportation which is used to travel between one country to another country. Right now, the question is, how can that be possible? Because airplanes came in later. There's no way someone could have it. If I have to argue with that logic, let me put this way: airplanes were invented somewhere in the 1900s, right? If I'm not mistaken, or let's just say 1800s, right? And the earliest manuscript still goes under third or fourth century, which is again a couple of hundreds years before that. How can that thought process of a flying vehicle, a means of transportation, from which can travel from one place to another? And I think there are other scripture which also talks about how the transportation also happens. There is a loud noise when the plane takes off or the vimana takes off, and those are mentioned, by the way. How could someone describe uh, an artifact which never existed at that point of time, and even for modern scientists, anyone for that matter, for next 800 years, that never came into fruition? So that itself is an argument, but I would say not a strong argument. But I still have a question: like, how can someone predict something that far ahead if they had no concept or clue of what that is? There has to be some fundamental idea, and how they existed. I'm not talking about how they existed, when it existed, or what were the actual things. But there are descriptions talks about the loud noise that comes out of these vimanas when they had to take off, right? And it doesn't, and it's very precise as well. It's just a machine, and again, it's not talking about a huge machine. I think a transportation from one place to another place, specifically used to travel between different countries or different realms, right? That's what it talks about. That's my understanding. Like, even if they have to say, it's still 800 years before the modern aircraft. So how do we justify that?
This is indeed a point that is very challenging for us, as most of humans have desired to fly from long times. So in most fictionist accounts, there are mentions of humans flying and wanting to fly, because as we said that flying is an emotion that even we as a child had. I'm sure that as a child you must have envisioned yourself flying in your dreams or whatever. Like, it's a really
I still do.
interesting thing humans have seeked, and that the
Mhm.
Vimanas could be fictionous will like might not be the point, because there are a few principles mentioned in the Hindu scriptures, and they often depict the scientific evidences about the existence of it, like some unknown principles and other points that could have given this credibility. But I mean that Vimanas are aerial carriers, and flying objects could be dependent on the technology and knowledge at that time, because as we said that humans have lost a lot of knowledge and information throughout history through wars and everything. There's been a lot of knowledge lost. As we know, the Nalanda library, there might be an account of losing the early forms of flight technology, possibly which are gained from lost civilizations and influences. But this could be a factor that have influence, because due to wars, the loss of knowledge, we might have lost the account why they were able to fly at such an early time before the development of this, as the scientific records over aerodynamics could prove that this existed, because in a Hindu scripture there was mentioned that there was aerodynamics, laws of aerodynamics, and material science, propulsion systems, which could have enabled early forms of flight, if not at the least the current technology we have. So that
Mhm.
might be a point that we could suggest, argue against the point that we had a lot of knowledge a long time ago, but it might have been lost due to wars and everything.
Understandable. So also the scriptures also suggest the same thing. As you know, the way Hinduism works, that you have the different yugas, right? And based on the yuga, there's one advanced civilization, and then it goes on, and then once everything is done, the civilization falls apart, and then we start over again. It goes in a cycle. If in other words, we're talking about an advanced civilization, and then the civilization was destroyed to one other reason, and then the next civilization, when it started again, it started from the scratch. When if we go by that argument, uh, we could talk about those knowledge being lost, but again, that would, entering into a region which is again pretty much on what if scenarios. Frankly, I have no proof regarding the Vimanas, or if it really exists or not. There is no proof. I don't want to discuss or dwell into that, because for one simple reason, it falls into the realm of uh, somewhat, not fairy tale, but somewhat of a imaginary construct, right? So there is nothing that I could use to justify it. But I am not saying that it doesn't exist, because most of the science which we have is nothing but things we haven't found out yet. So there is still time to identify it. Maybe if not this generation, next, or somewhere they could have more answers to it. But to my understanding, I'm not going to remove everything. Just one incident is not going to just remove everything from Ramayana. I'm going to stick with the
Hmm.
core elements which we have, which we've discussed. Those are verified, validated facts. Anything additional, I'm not discarding it, nor am I including it. When we have sufficient information, it can be part of it. If not, that can be outside of it, right? So that's the approach I would take.
Hmm.
That's my stand as well. Anyhow,
That might be suggested because in the historical and mythological records, the Vimanas are celestial vehicles used by gods and occasionally by humans in the ancient times. Also, the capability of Lord Hanuman flying through the air, which we would come into later. But these descriptions are not verifiable through empirical evidences, nor do they align with the known principles of aerodynamics. We could hold a few more research on the topic and maybe we discover in this time, because it might not be suggestive that the Ramayana was not was historical, but still that one point doesn't prove other like other points wrong, right? So as we said that
exactly.
we have 10 points in the favor of the Ramayana and 1 point in the against it. So we couldn't just discard every 10 point, right? So that could be a point that I have.
Exactly. So
Moving
also the
on,
religion promotes that as well, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. The religion promotes the same as well. It's, if you look at Hinduism, is nothing but seeking the truth. It's always about seeking the truth. There is no conclusion. This is the final version of it, right? It's always seeking the truth, right? So even if certain things don't align, the ideas don't fall apart, right? The fundamentals remain the same. The religion remains same. They don't fall apart because the religion itself is designed in such a way that it says we don't know the answers. God cannot be contained in one book. God is too difficult to understand, nor our history.
Hmm.
So we can't just we have hundreds and thousands of books, yet we can't understand. Hinduism says we can't understand God, and we don't know God fully, right? That's pretty much
Yeah, that's
the
pretty much
idea.
it. Hmm. The Now moving on to like the mythological accounts about Rama's journey throughout the northern and southern region of India, we could find
Hmm.
cultural and religional consistency because the Janaka dynasty, which was mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana, which was basically Sita, who was the daughter of Janaka. He was a
Correct.
wise and
Hmm.
just king of Mithila, because Mithila is a place in the northeastern region of India, and going through the historical accounts over that region, we could come across the kidnap route, and we could find that the stretch of the mainland across the army, like the entire logic failure in Valmiki, that the inconsistency that I've mentioned in the books and the records might lead to observations against the topic, but we couldn't really prove the point that the kidnap route followed by Rama and Sita was that important, because historical accounts suggest less. As we say that a few points could not defy others, there might be a few points that might go against the laws, but there might be a few points that don't. And anyways, like the Sakwala birds, you have heard of them in Egypt.
No, sir, I
The
haven't.
Yeah, so there is a concept in Egypt that there was sakwara birds, and they used to have anomalous effects, and they are sometimes cited as indications of early flight experiments, which could also suggest, because there
Mhm.
might be evidences that aerial transport and aircrafts in such earlier times could have been lost or suppressed over time, since we Indians were targeted and suppressed a lot during history. And this lost knowledge could also include insights on how the Vimanas and everything worked, and the cultural transmissions of from advanced civilizations we had in the ancient times could have been lost or over time.
Yeah, I think they have this concept of Kush rocket, like how we have Vimanas, they have the Kush rocket hieroglyphics in Egypt. Not mistaken, Egypt and even Mayan, Cambodia, all these places have some kind of flying objects that have been mentioned, I guess, in their traditions and religion as well. I think the Egyptian one could be the
Mm,
Kush rocket.
yeah, and we could also go on about the topic of Brahmastra, which was interpreted to contribute to a mushroom cloud, which we now know as the nuclear weapons, which
Nuclear
create a
weapon.
mushroom cloud. That could also have been akin to modern interpretations of nuclear weapons, but there are symbolisms and literal interpretations which could actually provide the descriptions. But some scholars argue that these descriptions might be allegorical and mythological expressions of the impact, because needless to say, Rama was a warrior at that time, and he did have a bent of a nice of a story, because even if Rama in itself is proved
Hmm.
that Rama did exist, we could also prove that the Ramayana did happen, because there are a lot of mentions about Rama and his place of birth, his marriage to Sita, his exile, the abduction, the alliance with the Sugriv, building of the bridge, and everything. These accounts could be proved through the proving of one factor, because Rama is involved in every one of them. So if it was
Correct.
proved that the epic Rama did exist, who is supposedly the avatar of God Vishnu, it directly corresponds to the fact that the Ramayana happened.
Hmm. You mentioned about Mithila earlier, right? Regarding
Yeah, the
Goddess
Mithila.
Sita's. Yeah. So I have the book of Ami Ganatra's Ramayana Unraveled, right? So on page 30, she has the map which she has put in, right? She talks about the
Mhm.
regions, as you mentioned, somewhere in the northeast where it's placed, and Ayodhya's place and other places as well. That reminded me again. So Amiganatra, sorry, she's a famous author, and she's also an expert in Ramayana as well as Mahabharata, right? And I've watched her podcast where she talks about how certain things which are not mentioned in the Ramayana but are still followed as modern day things. For example, until then I wasn't aware of this. So she mentioned Lord Hanuman doesn't really, carry a mace around. That's never mentioned in Valmiki's Ramayana. This is something which is added later
Hmm.
on. So I go and look for the same thing in my Valmiki. I have a Goldman translation, and I was looking into the same. And when I found out, I think one of those sagas, it says that the Vanaras were so strong, they can just uproot a tree, and that's what they used to use a weapon. They used to use their claws, teeth, and uproot trees as weapons. So they weren't technical mace per se, but they used anything big to attack. That's how strong the Vanaras were, right? So there has been some adulteration within the culture itself, people have made statements. We still believe that Hanuman carried a mace, but again, according to Valmiki's Ramayana, there is no mace involved, or that's not what
Hmm.
Hanuman used. And which also tied me up to another discussion. There is this another author called Nilesh Oak. So he had published this report where he's called as Sugriva's Atlas, right? So he talks about this place where in the Ramayana, Sugriva talks about certain places, and those places are accurate to modern times. It talks about Antarctica, Japan, and all other places as well, right? So he calls it Sugriva's Atlas, and he has written two books, if I'm not mistaken, and he has detailed it, but I haven't read the books. It talks. I've just heard him out on one of the websites. One of the websites I've seen his article, and other one is on one of the podcasts that he's been in. He talks about uh, how the locations have been described, right? So which means even the location which has been described, unless until the person has traveled over there or someone has traveled back to this location, they wouldn't be aware of those regions,
Yeah.
right? So either they had traveled or they got people who traveled from other locations to these regions. They were some kind of communication, and they were aware of those regions because they have frequently visited or they had some knowledge on those things.
Hmm. As like we know, Mithila is traditionally associated with the kingdom ruled by King Janaka, and it is
Janaka.
described in Ramayana as a prosperous city known for
Hmm.
wisdom and learning. But archaeological and cultural evidences, which is, I think, Mithila is presently in Nepal, right?
Let me just check the map again. Somewhere at the border. No, I think it's at the southern. It'll be a southern part of the Nepal and northern part of.
Yeah, it is
Wait, let me
between
just.
that, between the border.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the archaeological excavations and historical records suggest that Janakpur had been inhabited and continuously for centuries, which was aligning with the portrayals in ancient texts like Ramayana. And the temples and monuments dedicated to Sita, Ram, and Janaka in Janakpur attest to the city's cultural and religious significance tied to the Ramayana narrative, and that Janakpur is a major pilgrimage site for Hindus, especially those who revere Sita as the daughter of Janaka and consort of Rama. The Janaki
Hmm.
temple in Janakpur is dedicated to Sita, and which is pretty old. And according to the epic's narrative, these oral traditions that have been passed on do describe Mithila as a cultural heritage, and historical continuity of the Ramayana. But like I said in summary, when direct archaeological evidences linking specific events of the Ramayana to Mithila might be limited, but the city's cultural and religious and geographical associations with the epic narrative, there might not be real archaeological proofs, but it has to be some that someone did, a civilization did live in Mithila for thousands of years before the contribution of other people. Like we could prove that there were a lot of people, a civilization, an entire civilization living in the Janakpur area, and it
Hmm.
could provide a narrative that aligns with the epic Ramayana, which is providing circumstantial evidence of the historical significance within the Ramayana tradition. And this pilgrimage to Janakpur underscores its enduring role in the religious and cultural landscape of Southern Asia and India.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting though, because yeah, like, as you mentioned, we can't specifically say that what was mentioned there had transpired to be true, but it still has elements which makes the entire argument valid, because the description what it states and the culture and tradition hasn't changed in those regions, and whatever is mentioned in Ramayana is still which can be witnessed until today as well, though even if it's not part of India, like Nepal is outside. But the time of Ramayana, these were all in the same countries, right? And the regions mentioned are actual regions which are again verifiable today, and the cultures which are also still followed in those regions suggest that they were all died.
Hmm. Anyways,
right?
is
And
there any other topic that we could discuss on the existence of Ramayana? Because I think we have provided substantial evidence the relating to the fact that the Ramayana did happen.
one second. Wait. Uh, Sorry, one second. We have someone in the comment section, Roland Keith. Hey, Roland.
He has mentioned about the creation of God and everyone, but that's not what we are talking about today. We are talking about the existence of God and Rama.
Ramayana. Sorry, I just noticed that now that I wasn't looking at the comment section. I was under the impression no one would be there. Okay, it's good.
There's
Yeah.
been 9 minutes since I think
So
he might have.
yeah, I didn't pay attention. Sorry. So yeah. So yeah, in terms of Ramayana, I think there's sufficient proof. I just want to see what is the comments. Let's just see if we can look into these comments as well, though. Was What is not the common meaning of word? A belief is an acceptance that something exists or is true, or it is truly, especially one without proof, especially one without proof. Okay.
Okay.
I think he said the same thing twice.
Yeah.
Okay. Relational characters holding
Religion.
force against. Yep. It's like Roland does not agree with the system, the belief system which we have, characterized by holding false beliefs or judgments above external realities, mystical spiritual beings that are held despite incontrovertible evidence on the contrary to reality. Okay, but what is that we are talking about? What is that which you do not agree with?
I mean, we are talking about the Ramayana and not that Rama was a god or not. That is an other topic in itself because that is quite a deep topic we could go on hours about. But
Yeah,
we are
so
currently talking about the happening of the Ramayana, whether it was a human war or a god war. That is not a thing. But Roland, if you are still there, we are not talking about whether Rama was a god or not, which we could discuss later. But yeah, we are just giving historical accounts and evidences that the Ramayana epic did happen.
yep, and yeah, it's the same thing as you mentioned, right? So this is not the discussion, but again, if that has to be a discussion, we could have it some other day, or if Roland was here, maybe we could have continued with that discussion. Looks like he isn't, right? So yeah, today's topic was the information or the entire Ramayana. Can it be justified? Can it be validated? Can it does it fall under the rules which can be used to verify the existence of Ramayana? The discussion we've had, I was always convinced the discussion we had put made it more stronger that these are real incidents. They are not mythological stories as one would claim, and they are real, and it has worked out fine. It is as real as it can get, right? We're talking about something which happened 7,000
Hmm.
years ago, and we have more proof for something which happened 7,000 years ago than most we would have even post the second, the third century BC as well, right? Or the CE for
Yeah,
that matter.
so I think that's enough proof for something that is so old yet so known across the country. So I think that's the end of today's
Yes, sir.
discussion, and it was a really interesting and deep dive into the evidences and proofs and other challenges to the discoveries related to the Ramayana. But yeah, we have given enough assumptions from the media and evidences supporting the historicity of the Ramayana. So we could continue on the topic of Rama's um, mythical powers and if he was a god or not, because Roland here seems to say that God is a psychological creation, which is which is true in forms of Hinduism, which people usually denote with a polytheistic religion. But if we go deep into the fact, which we will later, um, we will come up with the ideas of Hinduism and its actual meaning rather than the meaning that have been um, spread as myths across the nation.
Yeah. End of the day, this is just religion for current generation. Like, do we have the same idea as the other countries and their religions? Not really. Though we tend to be a little laid back when it comes to our history or our culture. And so this is just a start where we could discuss these things. There would come a point where we'd have more people who are well versed, more knowledgeable than us. At some point they could shed more light on these things. For now, I feel that we've done justice to the topic. We've explained what it is, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah. All right, then. Today was an interesting day and we discussed a lot. And this might be the end of the stream. So, yeah.
Yes, sir, thank you for joining, and yeah, hope to do this again, and we'll have another interesting discussions some other time though.
Hmm. All
Right.
right.
Yep. Thanks, then take care.
Take care.
Yes, sir. I'll end the stream.